Welcome back to Genesis Does from Mr. MegaManFan. Today we are looking at Steel Empire by Hot B. This game originally came out on the Mega Drive, March 13th, 1992. North America, May 1992. And much later, it was ported to the Game Boy Advance in Japan and PAL territories 2004 and 5, respectively. Later, it came to Nintendo 3DS in Japan, North America, and the European Union 2014 to 2015. And believe it or not, it got one more port after that. It came to Windows on September 13th, 2018. I have no instruction manual to show Ryan in this video, but I do have the cartridge in the box, and it is a very nice looking cartridge. The label is not curling, there are no visible stains on it. The contact pins all seem to be really clean. So this was a well cared for game, which goes along with the instructions on the back, which are: do not submerge it in water, do not drop kick it across the room, do not blow it up with a stick of dynamite, always treat your Genesis games with respect, which is what I'm doing by putting it back into the clamshell case before I put it into my Analog Mega SG. But for the purpose of Genesis Does, and to give you the cleanest possible footage, I will be filming the gameplay again with an emulator. Now you will notice near the end of that opening segment I showed you the price sticker on the front. I bought it for $2.99, and you will not find it for those prices in 2020. Loose, it goes for $28. That's inflation for you. And complete in the box, if I had the manual, it's worth $65. If you're one of those collectors who want sealed, unopened games that you never play, you can pay an additional $35 premium and own it for $100. Suffice it to say, Steel Empire is not a super common game. In the Genesis rarity pantheon, it is not the most expensive game, but it's far from the low end of that dial. You're going to crank it up past 11 if you want to own a copy of this in any form. But what is the history of the Steel Empire, and why is it so coveted today? Let's start with the original Japanese title, Kotetsu Tokoku, and the lead game designer, Yoshinori Satake. He had this to say about why he wanted to make a steampunk-themed shoot-'em-up. Quote, "The image I had for the world was one of outrageous and nonsensical science. People in the 19th century didn't understand the limitations of the steam engine at all, and they thought that the steam engine could do anything. They wrote many blueprints for things like this. My idea for Steel Empire was to bring those designs to life. People back then thought there was an atmosphere in space, and that the aurora borealis actually existed in space, too. So I tried to express that in the last stage by having an atmosphere in the background, and I told the designers how people back then drew images of space with mist. Using that as our image, we designed the graphics of the final stage to have a colorful, aurora-like mist even though it's in outer space. So even in space, the propellers on the plane are spinning, and since there's an atmosphere, there's smoke too." So that tells you the philosophy of the game and a little bit about the graphical aesthetic of the game. And I think that also goes to explain some of the game's endearing popularity among collectors and enthusiasts, because it merges the aesthetic of steampunk, which has been pretty popular since, I would say, at least the 80s to 90s, all the way up to the modern day. And it also is a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up, which is one of the most beloved forms of gameplay, whether you're talking Sega Genesis, PC Engine, Super Nintendo, anything from the 80s and 90s that's a shoot-'em-up tends to have a cult following, and that cult following pays premiums for the games that they really love. So I've seen the same thing happen over the years to a lot less obscure shooters than the Steel Empire that I once paid fairly low prices for. R-type games, Gradius games, I've seen those just skyrocket in value because of the shoot 'em up collectors, and I would not pay those prices in this modern time, if I saw R-Type 3 going for what it goes for now, I would happily settle for playing it through SD to SNES or via emulator. But we're not here to talk about Super Nintendo. We're here to talk about Genesis doing what Nintendo doesn't. So, happily, Steel Empire was exclusive to Sega Mega Drive and Genesis for quite a long time. And my standard, as it has always been, is was it on the competitor during the contemporary period? And this one certainly wasn't. It didn't come to things like Virtual Console and Game Boy Advance until well after the heyday when it was released on the Genesis. So in its own time, it was definitely exclusive to Sega and nothing else. As for the gameplay, you've already seen the 3 different types of weapons that you have in your arsenal with the A, B, and C buttons. Now happily, this is one of those games where not having the instruction manual will not cripple you. You can figure it out rather quickly just by pushing all those buttons at the start. The A is your lightning bomb, as it was described in the opening crawl of text. That one just wipes out all the small enemies on the screen, and if you have a bigger boss enemy, it inflicts a significant amount of damage to that enemy to help you take it down. You can't one-shot it with a lightning bomb, but you can definitely cripple it and cut down the amount of time the fight takes. You also have a forward shooting weapon, which is your B button, and a reverse direction shooting weapon, that's your C button. This comes in handy for 2 different reasons. With bosses, when they take up large areas of the screen, you want to be able to maneuver around them, and whichever side of the screen they're on, you want to be able to shoot at them from that side. It also helps you when you go forward to pick up power-ups and enemies get behind you and they're still shooting at you, you can switch to the C button and hit those enemies tailing behind you so they don't damage you. This game is also fairly forgiving with the vitality statistic because you can increase it by picking up items and it decreases slowly when you get hit with enemy fire, so you're not going to die in just one hit. Unlike a Gradius, it is a lot more forgiving in terms of your ability to recover and sustain yourself and keep going in a fight. So this may also contribute to why the game has become a coveted game because of the gameplay mechanic making it a more accessible shooter than some of the most notoriously hard ones that you can play. And I'm not saying that hard shoot 'em ups are a bad thing, nor that easy shoot 'em ups are a good thing. I'm just saying when you have a combination of a fun shoot 'em up that you can get into quickly, but you still have to learn to master to get the best possible outcome, that's going to make it a highly desirable game, which seems to be another thing that's in the confluence of factors affecting the value of Steel Empire. But please, take this all with a grain of salt. Do not be one of those people that buys games just because they're rare. If you're watching my footage of Steel Empire right now and going, oh my god, listen to all this stuff about how this game is every single thing combined into making it valuable, I'm making the wrong point and you're probably gleaning the wrong point from that. So let me just stop right there and say value isn't the important factor here. Is it fun to play? Yes. Would it be fun if it was a $5 game? Yes. Would it be fun if it was a $125 game? Yes. Would I pay $125 for it? Absolutely not. That's not going to happen. So look for this game at a pawn shop, thrift store, flea market, garage sale. If you see it for a good price and you're willing to pay that price because it looks like a fun game, by all means do that. If you do find it and it's a price you're not willing to pay, I'm not going to blame you for playing it in emulation or some other way. Try it before you buy it is my motto when it comes to these kind of things. And if you didn't have this option to play it this way with an emulator, then how would you ever know if it was any good to begin with? I mean, it's the same thing I would say with a Blu-ray or a DVD. Like, if you didn't see the movie and you don't know if the movie's any good, why are you going to pay $25 for it brand new? I would find a way to watch it first before you pay for a copy of it. And if you can do it in theaters, well, that's one thing that we can't do during a pandemic, but that's my way of try before buy in most cases is if I went to the theater and saw it and enjoyed it, then I would probably want to own a copy of it later on. But if I went to the theater and I was just kind of, yeah, it was all right, but I don't feel like I ever want to watch that again, then I'm not going to buy a physical copy. Or if I am going to buy a physical copy, I'm going to wait till it shows up used somewhere like Half Price Books where I'm only paying $5 to $10 for it as opposed to $25 brand new sealed. So that's kind of the metric I use in general when it comes to things that I want to own. Like, did I have fun with it before? And would I have fun with it again? Steel Empire, I can safely say, I've had fun with this before. I will have fun with it again. And one of the reasons for that, besides all the other things that I've mentioned, is that you can switch between two types of fighter aircraft. You have a fast-moving strike plane that can maneuver around the screen, firing at multiple targets in a very quick amount of time, or you have this slow-moving Zeppelin, not as maneuverable, but it packs a big punch in terms of firepower. And having that option to switch between one or the other between levels makes it also a strategic game as opposed to just being a straight shoot 'em up where you just blindly fire on repeat. You have to actually pick the best aircraft for each level that you're playing based on the environment that you're in. And the game has enough of a narrative that it even tells you that. It's like, okay, this next area you're entering has lots of hidden caverns and volcanic gases and submerged weapons that you won't see until they shoot at you. So be on your guard and adjust accordingly. And when it gives you that kind of narrative, you can choose what kind of weapon you want and fight the level in the way that you think is best. And when you take too many hits, you'll get a warning in your vitality bar telling you, hey, now's the time to be more cautious because you're just about to die. So if you think what you're doing is working, it's not. Adjust accordingly. Speaking of which, I'm about to encounter a mid-stage boss here where I stupidly thought if I stayed low to the ground, I'd be able to attack it, and it just chewed me up and spit me out like I was nothing. So that was not an effective strategy. But that's the fun of Steel Empire. You play it, you learn, you get better. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This has been Genesis Does, and thank you for watching.